All right, Notre Dame, NC State. Next up, Notre Dame, 7.5-point road favorites here, 51 being the total in this game. And I've been going back and forth with this because so much of your week two it's going to be the third game for those teams that played in week 0, but for most teams it's their second game. And when you go from game 1 to game 2, you have to evaluate. Last week with NC State, who got the win but did not get the point spread cover against UConn last week, and Conor and I like the points there with the Huskies. It cashes in. Was NC State just not as good as odds makers thought they would be, or was UConn better than maybe odds makers thought they would be? So that's the determining factor here going into this week. Here's what I liked about NC State. I thought their offense was solid, and you have the Brennan Armstrong, Robert and I connection going back to Virginia. Those two were together there, QB and OC, a couple of years ago, where that offense just absolutely took off and had a huge year for the Cavaliers. But the offense, was solid against UConn, but they had their starts and stops in that football game. But part of me thinks UConn could be a lot better on the defensive side of the football. So while they kind of labored their way to the points they ended up getting at NC State, it was 24 that they ended up scoring in that 24-14 win, but it didn't feel like it was an easy 24 points. They had to really grind for everything they got. Armstrong had 155 passing yards. Ran for 96. They didn't run the football nearly as well with Jordan Houston as I maybe thought they would. But I think UConn is improved on the defensive side of the football. And that's something to keep in mind. I still think if you're projecting NC State's offense moving forward, I think this is going to be a pretty good offense. And I certainly think it's got the potential to have a little bit more explosiveness and dynamic attributes to it than we saw last year. Because keep in mind, run heavy. Devin Leary's a solid quarterback, but he's more of a dink and dunk intermediate passer quarterback. Now you're going to have a guy that's going to stretch the field a little bit here with Brennan Armstrong. So I expect the offense to be good for NC State this season moving forward, and maybe in this game here as well against Notre Dame. And I certainly like what I see on the offensive side of the football so far this season from Notre Dame. Granted, Tennessee State and Navy is not exactly a murderer's row of a 2 games to start the season. But still, everything we've seen, albeit against some weak defensive competition, Notre Dame should be able to have success offensively this year. You bring in a Sam Hartman who has just played an incredible amount of college football. The experience that he has is off the charts. He's an extremely accurate quarterback. He's working with, I think a pretty solid O-line, a very good O-line. Jack Alt in particular, he's going to be going high in the NFL draft in that left tackle spot for Notre Dame. But he's been very, very impressive. Part of me coming into the season said, wow, they're really going to miss Michael Mayer. But, from what I've seen, this is a Notre Dame offense that's still got enough to go around. They got the quarterback. They've got the good O-line. They've got Jaden Thomas, Chris Tyree, at wide receiver. Audric Estime, a very, very strong running back. Not only has he got the burst in the open field, but he's powerful too. It's very tough to bring him down. So I think this is a very, very good Notre Dame offense. I kind of think this game has some points in it. I came into the season thinking NC State could start to play to some overs this season because the defense not nearly as good, in my opinion, this year. Now, they were solid against UConn, but you're talking about Joseph Vignano, an offense that doesn't have the speed and the playmakers on the perimeter and the outside that maybe Notre Dame is going to throw at them here. I think it's going to be a much greater challenge for the stop unit for Dave Doran's NC State squad. So I'm more interested in the total here as far as the side is concerned. Notre Dame, I think they win the game. Do I want to lay 7.5 here on the road? I'm not so sure about that considering how weak their competition has been, but I think this offense could really have a pretty big day here against NC State. And conversely, I think the NC State offense, like I said, going forward will continue to be, I think, a better unit this year on that side of the ball than they were last year with Brennan Armstrong at quarterback and Robert and I at OC. And I don't know how good Notre Dame's defense is. You haven't played anybody yet. And Navy had one of the worst offensive game plans I think I've ever seen against this Notre Dame defense. Everything was 2 yards in a cloud of dust. Where was this shotgun offense and throwing the ball a little bit that they promised everybody going into the season? We didn't see it from Navy. So how much was Notre Dame's defense tested, really, in that game? So I think we see enough points. We're not asking for an ultimate shootout here. The total's only 51. I think it can get over that number. What do you think here, Connor? Notre Dame, NC State.
One thing real quick on the total, Notre Dame too. Been a good moneymaker to the over. 8 of its last 9, going back to last year, I've gone over. So if you do like this over, but I think this is where NC State at home, the defense needs to turn up in this one. Notre Dame has played nobody you talked about. I mean, Navy is just in a whole kind of rebuild. Like you talked about, the offense was nowhere to be found. In Tennessee State, come on. I mean, I guess you play who's in front of you. So congrats to Notre Dame. Still haven't given up a touchdown. And I want to see this Notre Dame defense. But is this the offense that I really think can explode against them? Maybe, because I still have question marks. As good as Brennan Armstrong is, I've seen the good, I've seen the bad with him. And I thought he was just subpar against UConn. He threw for 155. He almost had 100 yards on the ground. So, but one problem here, I think there's a little too much love right now to Notre Dame. Now you go to the road, hostile environment, over a touchdown here. I am looking at NC State catching the 7.5, 8. I think I'm going to stay off the total as of right now. Babano, Notre Dame will be tested. Can they get it out of there with a win? Maybe cover? Yeah, but I think if they do, I think this game is tight. So I like the points here.
All right, liking the home dog here is Connor Mack early in the week, NC State